Hello, Sufang. As always, you're the first one. Hello, Ifan. Hello, nice to see you all. always my best friend, like, come first. Okay, so for you two, can you, hello, are you still here? Hello, is everything okay? Is the connection okay? And can you check with me that everything, you can hear everything good? Hello, thank you. Thank you for coming in. Just check with me that everything is good, as usual. Okay, so if anything happens to get loose, like the connection is not okay or you cannot hear me clearly, just let me know, okay? So I'm not sure how many people will come today. It seems to me that not so many people eventually get into the Ding Talk group, but anyway, we'll still proceed as usual. But while still waiting for some potential people to come in, some brief introduction about the cover I have chosen for this presentation. Okay, so she is not the historical Hannah Arendt. Okay, so she is it is taken from a film called Hannah Arendt from 2012. It's an absolutely brilliant film. I would say it's from that film I start to kind of fall in love with this very intellectual lady and like to explore more about her. And it's also more or less through that film, I know that she has a very intimate relationship with Heidegger, my favorite philosopher, and which constitute part of my reason to try to explore more of her philosophy as well. And today I will concentrate on her most famous book, actually, The Human Condition. And then I would like to do a brief introduction about the whole book, a summary of the whole book, but it turns out that it's much more nuanced than I have projected, and because there are so many things I like to share. Today I just do a part one, so hopefully I will do a part two in the coming week, so we can have a full picture of her philosophy. Okay, so yeah, I'll just go on, and while waiting for potential people to come in. Okay, so again, whatever, since all of you here I belongs to my best friend, my dearest friend, so be free to interact with me. Okay, so always adding comments, always adding questions or raise question whatsoever. Okay, so I'm not sure how long this presentation will last. Actually, I plan 2 hours, but maybe it will be no longer than 2 hours, but it may be shorter. Okay, because it's basically theoretical. I don't need to show you film clip. There's one, but just one. And then I don't need to do loads of film analysis. So therefore, even I tend to kind of do it in an hour and a half, and always at the middle point of it, I will give you a like 5 to 10 minutes break. Okay. So, still, a brief introduction about her. So, Hannah Arendt is absolutely one of the most influential political philosophers of the 20th century, okay? And then I can add controversial as well, because as we will go on to unpack her philosophy, we'll know that her philosophy is not, I would say, it meant to be controversial, and you will know the reason very soon. Okay, and then interesting thing is about the hesitation about the words philosopher. The interesting thing about her is like if you tend to think that philosopher is sort of very high comment that you can give to a thinker, but Hannah Arendt, she sort of refused this word like a political philosopher because she sort of discovered some fundamental flaw in this discipline we call political philosophy. And then he sort of reconceptualized what we understand as politics. Therefore, she's very interesting. She prefers to call herself a political theorist or political thinker instead of a political philosopher. Okay, so that's a, and we'll soon know why. Okay, so what's her radical reconceptualization of politics as such? Again, his seminal works are two: The Origin of Totalitarianism, and then, which is not the one we're going to deal with, but this one, The Human Condition. So the first one is more historical, and the second one is more philosophical. It provides the sort of theoretical framework of her philosophy. That's why it's sort of seminal works of her. And some of the key concepts, just to give you some ideas about who her is, like vita activa. which is Latin, means vital activity. Okay, vital activity, and vita contemplativa means vital contemplation. It means to thinking. Okay, these two. The first one is what we're going to concentrate upon throughout this presentation, and I guess the most famous, her most famous concept is this one: the banality of evil. Okay, it derives from her report from the trial in Jerusalem of Nazi, and sort of derived this concept of the banality of evil. I'm very interested in this idea, and I believe that most of you will be interested in this idea. But unfortunately, it's not covered in this book, The Human Condition, because by the time she has written the book, the Jerusalem trial has not taken place yet, and banality of evil comes later. And unfortunately, Hannah didn't write a book on this topic about banality of evil, so we can only gather this idea through secondary sources and other comments or essays that she has written upon it. So hopefully, in the future, if I have done enough research on this idea about banality of evil, I will also give a lecture on it. Okay. So, and probably my most interesting aspect of her thinking is that she is Heidegger's what's called the passion of love, the passion of life. If you were in my previous presentation about love being delighted, about in the mood for love, you kind of know the love affair between them, which is very inspirational, and it's also it's very beautiful and poetic, philosophical, of course. And then, but we will not try to reduce Arendt's philosophy to a mere extension of Heidegger, but because I read both, and I can feel like how she was influenced by Heidegger, which is prodigiously, which I also talk about during the presentation. Even though throughout the whole human condition, Hannah has never given a reference to Heidegger. There's no reference on Heidegger's work, but Hannah tried to dedicate this work to Heidegger. It was cancelled after some controversy, but she tried to dedicate this work to Heidegger, and I can feel that when she was influenced by Heidegger, and I would like to also point out those points, okay, during the presentation. Okay, so basic outline of the presentation we'll do today. So we'll mostly focus on his idea about the public and private realm, and the idea about labor. Okay, so it's a very interesting idea because this is just try to summarize the first part of the book. So, but there are already enough sort of comments I like to give, and there's loads of things I like to highlight, and I think that she can sort of influence to rethink what is politics, what is being human, what is freedom, and so on. And these are the key concepts I would like to unpack during the presentation. They are not organized in a strictly chronological order, which doesn't which means I won't say okay, public, private, politics, society, freedom, equality. It's more or less chronological, but because Hannah's writing is very sort of interconnected, so the first topic may connect to the final one. Okay, so just to give you a pre-warning there, but it's absolutely logical, it absolutely flows. Okay, so be sure of that. And Hannah's writing is very, very accessible. I would say Hannah is the most accessible modern philosopher, I would say, that I have ever read. Okay, so compare with like Nietzsche, Heidegger, Sartre, Foucault, Deleuze, and then Lacan, many other guys, that Hannah is absolutely the most accessible one and most readable one. So I absolutely recommend the work to you, especially if you find this presentation very interesting. And because most of the quotes are original, so I like to give you the sort of clear sense of who Hannah is and how she sort of think. Okay. Okay. So first of all, what's the motivation? So what's the foundation? What motivates Hannah to think about the human condition? So what does it mean to be human? What condition us to be human? So it is called world alienation. I won't unpack this concept in this presentation, but I just give you some sort of like superficial meaning of it. It basically means about alienation, and it's not just between individual. It's about the alienation between us and the world. And it is sort of characterized by three aspects, which also motivates Hannah to pursue this kind of philosophy. The first of all is totalitarianism. Okay, so because Hannah sort of written, so this book is written in 1958. It was published in 1958. So you can say you do know that it's the aftermath of the Second World War, and because Hannah she is a Jew, so she is necessarily influenced by Nazism, and she almost died of that. Okay, so absolutely it's a key topic, and it's also about Stalinism. Okay, it's about which is a kind of thing I do not dare to give too many comments because I do fear I'd be censored. Okay, so I'll concentrate on Nazism. Okay, so it's basically the totalitarian regime, the most horrible political regime you can think of on earth. So, how to come to terms with the twin horrors of the 20th century? So, this is the first question that Hannah tried to ask. Try to ask and try to find an answer for it. So the first one about Nazism, about totalitarianism. The second one is about technology. Okay, it's also a very prominent feature of modern eras or modern times. So human beings are becoming thoughtless creatures at the mercy of very gadget, which is technically possible no matter how murderous it is. Okay, so this is her original words, which I think is very brilliantly illustrated by this classical film from Chaplin about the modern times. Okay, so you can see the simile there. Okay, so to the modern times about technology, we define ourselves technologically, even though, as Hannah said, however murderous it can be. Okay, and the final thing I would say is the key topic of today and also Hannah's book is this idea about the glorification of labor, which I think sort of exists most closely with us because we are in a socialist country. So we necessarily take in this idea or this ideology about the glorification of labor. So what's Hannah's criticism of that? So a factual transformation of the whole society into a laboring society. So this is what she observed uh, in a modern society. It is a society of laborers which is about to be liberated from the fetters of labor. So there's a sort of contradiction there. So we are in a laboring society, but we're always trying to free ourselves from labor, from the fetters of labor. So this is the paradox that exists at the very root of the modern society. And this society does no longer know of those other higher and more meaningful activities for the sake of which this freedom would deserve to be won. I think this brings the criticism to the home. Okay, so we are of a laboring society today. We tend to regard everything as labor, including what I'm doing now. Okay, as sort of intellectual labor, if you like this phrase. So we tend to regard everything as labor on one hand, but on the other, we try to liberate ourselves from the fetters of labor. But the key point here is not about the liberation or the kind of disenfranchisement of labor, but it's about um, why liberation or why labor? So what are the higher and more meaningful activities? If we today we tend to think that everything is labor, then what are this activity? What's more meaningful? Okay, so that's the key point, the key question that Hannah tried to answer and tried to ask throughout her work. That's why I think she's sort of so close to us because obviously because our social milieu, and also because in these days everyone is sort of struggling with this kind of social condition of nature, this condition of involution, and this sort of implicitly accepted regime of 996or 007or this kind of actual working hours. So she's absolutely relevant and absolutely thought provoking for us. Okay, so that's why I'm interested in her, and I like to share her ideas. So, so basically, her book is structured by this differentiation, what she called vita activa. So she tried to define human by observing three of the most fundamental human activities, which he called vita activa, which means vital activities. So first of all is labor. So she defined labor, work, and action, and they do mean something different. So for her, labor means the activity which is tied to the human condition of life, which means that it's about to sustain human life. It's about the necessary. Okay, so labor is only about, in other words, about provide the necessary for your life, which means food, which I illustrate via this picture. Okay, so this is properly called labor, according to Arendt. It's about to support your life. It's about to provide the necessary for your life, which is different from work. Okay, so according to Arendt, work is the activity which is tied to the condition of worldliness. So it is when labor is about life, work is about worldliness, which means about to provide a world to live in. That is to build and maintain a world fit for human use. So it's about the useful. Therefore, it's sort of linked with this kind of manufacturing. It's about fabrication. It's about producing use object for us to use, like the computer. I'm using the lighting here, and also the clothing here. It's also for it's not necessary for life, but it's for use. It's about building a world that we can inhabit. Okay, and everything is different from action. So action exists on the top of the hierarchy of vita activa, according to Arendt. So action is the activity tied to the condition of plurality. It sounds a bit weird, but basically means human plurality. It means our difference, our uniqueness, our individuality as a human being. It's about to disclose the identity of the agent, to affirm the reality of the world, and to actualize our capacity for freedom. So through this description, I can see that you can sense why action occupies the highest point during on this hierarchy of vita activa, because it's about self-actualization. It's about defining who we are. It's about the actualization of our capacity for freedom, and it's about the affirmation of the reality of the world. Okay, I sort of illustrate this because Hannah took this concept basically from the ancient Greek and Roman context. Therefore, I use that biblically, the statesman, her oration during the Peloponnesian War. So this is called action. Okay, and I will unpack later. So what she mean? But actually, action is not the key point here. So today I will focus upon labor. Okay, because it's also sort of concern us mostly. Okay, so first of all, she gave us this idea about public realm. And I think this idea is sort of commonplace now. It's sort of populated by Arendt. But public realm is linked to this kind of plurality of human beings about being in a world with others. So as Arendt writes, no human life, not even the life of the hermit in the nature's wilderness, is possible without a world which directly or indirectly testify to the presence of other human beings. Okay, it basically means we live in the world with others. So that's what Hannah means by plurality. And because of this plurality, we have politics. Okay, so this is Arendt's idea. Because we live in the world with others, therefore we need politics. So political activity is characterized by two action, that is action and speech. So we act and speak. It sounds a bit weird now because we think that, well, that's basically what we're doing every day. It's what I'm doing now, right? I'm speaking, so I'm also acting in a sense. And he argued that because this is sort of the basic thing that constitutes us as human, out of which arises the realm of human affairs, from which everything merely necessary or useful is strictly excluded. I think this is the key point. Because we tend to think that, okay, whatever I do is either action or speech, okay? Either I do it silently or I do it vocally. But Hannah argued political activity does not include or do not include merely necessary or useful, which means it does not include labor and work. Okay, and this is the key point, and this is also the central point of his criticism about the degeneration of politics and public realm in the modern world. So that's why Hannah keep arguing that finding the right words at the right moment, quite apart from the information or communication they may convey, is action. So it sounds a bit even weirder now because we tend to think, okay, speech is about information or communication, right? But she argued it's about the right words, about the right moment. It's about this kind of selection. This about this activity of articulation, of enunciation. It's action. Therefore, rhetoric, the art of speaking, occupies such a central role in the classical education. That's why Berkeley, in order to be a brilliant statesman, or one would say one of the most brilliant statesmen in the classical world, because he is also a brilliant rhetorician, like also Cicero, like Seneca, or Alcibiades, or Caesar. They're absolutely good at rhetoric because it constitutes the fundamental thing about political activity as such, which comprise mainly of action and speed, which is neither necessary nor useful. Okay, and keep unpacking it a bit. It has a Homeric origin because Hannah sort of quote Homer's epic, Iliad, to illustrate the point. This passage comes from Phoenix's speech in Iliad. It clearly refers to education for war and agora, the public meeting, in which men can distinguish themselves. So this is this guy, Phoenix, who is the educator of Achilles, who is the central hero in this epic of Iliad. and is also sort of kind of regarded in ancient Greek as the model person for people to educate themselves against. Okay, so he said, your father, means Achilles' father, charged me to teach you all this, to be a speaker of words and doer of deeds. It sounds very weird. I do remember this line when the first time I read Iliad because it just sounds so strange. Okay, the speaker of words and doer of deeds. So what else? So it sounds like it summarizes everything, right? But Hannah argued it's not everything. It's about action, which is different from the necessary and the useful. Okay, and that's the key point and key takeaway here. So, and then by contradistinction, so what is private ground? So we say, okay, in the public realm, there's no necessary and useful. So, which means that there's no labor and no work. So where are those two activities? They are confined, according to Arendt, in the private ground, which means the household. So she argued that the distinctive trait of the household sphere was that in it men lived together because they were driven by wants and needs. Okay, so this is how she characterized our family, our household. It's about wants and about needs. That's why we need labor. We need labor to provide us with a necessity. We need a world to inhabit. We need clothing. We need a house to dwell. And this is about our wants and needs. And this is provided by the private realm. By contrast, the realm of polis, which means the public and political realm, on the contrary, was a sphere of freedom. So you can see that sort of how people at that time defined freedom. So freedom means that to be free from wants and needs. That's what Hannah argued. Therefore, the previous one, called the speaker of words and the doer of deeds, means that you are a free man. You are free to speak the words and you are free to do the deeds. And you are free from the wants and needs. So that's the key point, and that's the key distinction between the private realm and the public realm. Okay? Because the public realm should be the sphere of freedom. And which is absolutely different from modern understanding because everything so far sounds very strange. And Hannah drew this comparison. He called it modern collective housekeeping. So she argued that in our understanding, the dividing line is entirely blurred. That's why we feel so strange about this kind of differentiation. She argued that because we see the body of peoples and political communities in the image of a family. Okay, so she argued because in the ancient time, we try to define public realm means politics, and the household, the private realm means family, and now we combine these two things together. For us, the political community that we live in is an image. We conceptualize it in the image of a family, whose everyday affairs have to be taken care by a gigantic nationwide administration of housekeeping. Okay, so this is Arendt, her criticism about modern politics and modern society. The scientific thought that corresponds to this development is no longer political science. Okay, so that's why she sort of differentiates herself from most of the political philosophers or theorists because she argued what they are claiming they are doing are not political science. She's arguing like guys like Marx or Smith are not political philosopher or political scientists in the strictest or the classical sense of the word. But they are what they mean by national economy as or social economy are nothing more than collective housekeeping. Okay, so that's why she sort of differentiates herself from the modern thinker, from the modern political philosopher as well, because for her, politics means something very, very different. It's absolutely different from what she called collective housekeeping. Okay? And then what is politics? What is politics according to Arendt's conceptualization? So for her, politics means freedom, or politics is freedom, as she argued. Like what all Greek philosophers, no matter how opposed to post life means political life, took granted that it is a freedom is exclusively located in the political realm. Okay, it's about freedom, and in a sense, it is freedom. That necessity is primarily a pre-political phenomena, characteristic of the private household organization, and that force and violence are justified in this sphere because they are the only means to master necessity, for instance, by ruling over slaves. And to become free means felicity and eudaimonia. What she means basically is that, as we said, labor and work provides us the necessity to sustain our life. Therefore, because they are still confined within the realm of the private, they're still confined within the realm of the necessity, it is pre-political. it is not political in the sense it's not free. And to be free means that you are already in the public realm because you are means that you are no longer confined by the necessity, by the desire and want of the private household organization. In which, in ancient time, you have slaves because slaves are responsible for all the kind of labors, all the kind of works to provide you, to give you, and to condition your political and free being. So this is the classical condition of politics as freedom, and it's also what they call a eudaimonia, which will this is also very interesting and famous concept from of the ancient Greek idea about good life or felicity, and which we'll also sort of unpack more a bit later. And also, this kind of idea about freedom is strictly connected with the idea of equality. Okay, and she continue argues that the post was distinguished from the household in that it knew only the equals. Okay, so whereas the household was the center of the strictest inequality, to be free meant both to be subject to the necessity of life, or not to be subject to the necessity of life, or to be command of the other and not to be in command of oneself. It meant neither to rule nor to be ruled. Okay, the reason why we say like the freedom means equality means everybody, just you don't need to rule anyone. You also don't need to rule. You don't need to rule anyone. Also, you don't need to be ruled by anyone, which takes place in the household when you have a when you as a male in a time as a male you are the father. Okay, you rule over your wife and your slaves. So you are a ruler, and in that sense, you are also not free because you are sort of still chained by your rulership. Therefore, in Herodotus, where the person who defends Greek equality argues that he wishes neither to rule nor to be ruled. That's why they need democracy. That's why they argue for equality, because to rule or to be ruled are all the conditions that makes you unfree. Okay, that sort of jeopardize your freedom as a free citizen, as an equal among others in the polis. Okay, and also like to be free meant to be free from the inequality present in rulership. That's why, and to move in a sphere where neither rule nor being ruled existed. That's why in the classical concept, freedom means equality, and they are the same. And which is very different from ours, because our modern politics is sort of like what she called like its social function. So she argued that in the modern world, the social and political realms are much less distinct, and Arendt does lament that. So that politics is nothing but a function of society, that action, speech, and thought are primarily superstructures upon social interest, is not a discovery of Karl Marx, but on the contrary, is among the axiomatic assumptions that Marx accepted uncritically from the political economics of the modern age. Okay, so this idea about the society is a function. Our politics is a function. It's a very strange idea, even though we have taken it for granted. We think, okay, it's the government's job to do this or do that. This is not a classical concept. This is a very modern concept, and everything like action, speech, or thought are sort of like superstructure or sort of like supportive services for this function of society is also a very modern production. And this functionalization of politics, which gives rise to society, and which she also differentiates from politics, gives the rise of the household or the economic activities to the public realm. So something different has happened. She argues like the household, which used to belong to the private realm, has entered the public realm, and something which caused some fundamental transformation of the public realm. So it becomes a housekeeping on all matters pertaining formally to the private sphere of the family have become a collective concern. Okay, so what she argues basically, usually in ancient time, this considering about necessity, about economics, about making money, and everything about this kind of functionalization of politics, and not in politics, and not in the polls in ancient time. But in the modern times, this sort of boundary get crossed, and the society become a household. That's why every government in the world are sort of nowadays engrossed by this idea about GDP, right? So GDP, the GDP becomes sort of like a central concern for our government. Is the best representation for what Arendt called the functionalization of politics, and politics become a collective concern. But then we ask then what people do in the classical model of politics, if not for the concept of GDP. That's why we say it's so relevant to read Arendt, because she sort of just defamiliarize us with so many ideas we simply take them for granted. Okay, and she argued the politic is for good life and eudaimonia, the concept. So the good life, as Aristotle called the life of the citizen, therefore was not merely better or more carefree or nobler than the ordinary life, but they were altogether different qualities. So it's absolutely different. It's absolutely different from the household life, from the private life. It was good to the extent that by having mastered the necessities of shared life, by being freed from labor and work, and by overcoming the innate urge of all living creatures for their own survival, it was no longer bound to the biological life process, and that's the key word. You are not no longer bound to the biological life process. That's the idea about being free from necessity, about being free from labor and work. Okay, so that's why she argued that household in the household the private ground in the classical society has a function. The function is to provide the necessity and also to confine this concern for necessity within a particular location and sort of prevent it from invading our public ground, from invading the political life, which should be the place for the good life, or eudaimonia according to the concept. So without mastering the necessities of life in a household, neither life nor good life is possible. But politics is never for the sake of life. This is also a very radical argument, which is absolutely different from our modern concept or contemporary concept even, because we tend to think that life is everything, right? So life is the highest standard that we judge and measure everything. Okay, and this should be left to the next part, because that comes to the final part of the book. So she argued that as far as the members of the poles are concerned, household life existed for the sake of good life in the pole. So we have household, we have the private ground, only because we want the good life in the post, which is absolutely something absolutely different. But in a modern time, the society has become a household, and that's Arendt's criticism of modern society. So this kind of striking coincidence of the rise of the society and the decline of the family indicates clearly that what actually took place was the absorption of the family unit into the corresponding social groups. Like we tend to think that family is sort of disintegrating in modern society. But Arendt is arguing it is because the whole society has become a family, become a household, which, even though it sounds very intimate and sounds good, but it's not good according to her. So she said, it is decisive that the society on all its levels excludes the possibility of action. And that's the key point, because for Arendt, action is what actually constitutes us as human. So action is that what really conditions us as being human, which formerly was excluded from the household. So instead, society expects from each of its members a certain kind of behavior. Okay, so behavior is different from action according to Arendt. So imposing innumerable and various rules upon the individual, all of which tend to normalize its members to make them behave, to exclude spontaneous action or outstanding achievement, and that's the key point. So today we are normalized in the society, we are normalized, we behave according to certain patterns. We no longer act spontaneously, and we no longer have or achieve outstandingly. And that's why I find this picture is very illustrating, because the point is very Foucauldian. Okay, this if you are not familiar with Foucault previously, and this is Foucault's very extreme and also very classical conceptualization of modern society as a panopticon. Basically, it means it's a prison, and here is a guy, or potentially there's a guy who in the tower who watch over everyone to make sure that everyone behave according to a certain pattern, who behave normally. That's what we mean by normalization of the members. So like today we tend to think that people in the society act according to certain patterns, and this is called normalization, which is not spontaneous and it's not outstanding. Outstanding or excellence in the modern society is sort of it's abnormality. Okay, so that's why she said that the rise of mass society only indicates that the various social groups have suffered the same absorption into one society that the family unit has suffered earlier. Okay, and that's why she laments society as a household. It's a bit hot, therefore I add extra power to the fan. Okay, so that's why she sort of compare what's in ancient time we call political equality and today we call social equality, and they are different concepts. So this modern equality arise as a modern society as a household based on the conformism inherent in society and possible only because behavior has replaced action as a foremost mode of human relationship, in that every respect different from equality in antiquity. Okay, so it's like conformism. We conform to a certain or normal patterns of behavior. The behavior has replaced action, and I find it's very well illustrated by this screenshot from Orson Welles' very good film called The Trial. Absolutely recommended. It's a classical piece, and this is called behavior. So everyone behave in a certain way, and everyone just behave like anyone else. Okay, and this is conformism. This is what Anna argue in the extreme form, called social equality, which is different from political equality, which is the post was permeated by a fierce agonal spirit, which means competition, where everybody had constantly to distinguish himself from all the others, to show through unique deeds and achievements that he was the best of all. That's why I think it's most vividly illustrated by Olympic Games in the ancient Greek. So everyone are competing for excellency. Everyone are competing for outstandingness to distinguish themselves from the people, and this is political equality. So in the public realm, in other words, was reserved for individuality of becoming yourself. In other words, for self-actualization and self-realization. It was the only place where men could show who they really and inexchangeably were. And that's why it's so important. It is reserved for this function only. Okay? And then again, it's sort of this kind of political realm, this kind of competitiveness is sort of crushed by our modern economics. I know some of you learn economics. I'm not criticizing your discipline, okay, and I believe that Arendt is not criticizing this discipline, as criticizing this mode of thinking or the kind of monopoly of economic mode of thinking. Okay, so it's that this kind of the same conformism, the assumption that men behave and do not act with respect to each other. So that's why it's very important. So if because we do not act with respect to each other, because we do not recognize the other as a unique human being, because we do not recognize this condition, this human condition, which Arendt called human plurality. Therefore, we have conformism. We conform to certain patterns. We behave according to certain patterns. That lies at the root of modern science of economics. Okay, everyone just behave according to certain patterns. So economics could achieve a scientific character only when men had become social beings and unanimously follow certain patterns of behavior, so that those who did not keep the rules could be considered to be asocial or abnormal. Okay, so this is kind of economic logic, sort of underline the modern society, so everyone just behave according to a predictable pattern. But according to Arendt, unpredictability is the very essence of human action, instead of predictability. Okay, so she argued that the law of statistics, okay, are valid only where large numbers or long periods are involved, and acts or events, which according to her are really human activities, can statistically only appear as derivations of fluctuation, which also means abnormal or asocial. And that's why I think this is also a very Foucauldian point, as Foucault argued that modern society creates madness. Because it just recognizes everything which is out of the pattern as abnormality, as madness, which is not, according to Arendt, because that's part of condition, because we are human, we're different. Because human plurality underlines our being human. And this is sort of crushed down by this kind of modern statistical economic mode of thinking. And keep unpacking the point. And only deeds and events. As you still remember that Homeric quotes the doer of deeds, which sounds very strange, but deeds or events mean something very different for Hannah Arendt. So she keeps saying that the justification of statistics is that deeds and events are rare occurrences in everyday life and in history, which is true. So extraordinary, because it is extraordinary, it's necessarily rare, right? So yet the meaningfulness of everyday relationship is disclosed not in everyday life but in rare deeds. It is those kind of rare moments, this kind of magnificent, extraordinary moments that makes life meaningful, and which is excluded by economic or statistic way of thinking. So just as the significance of a historical period shows itself only in few events that illuminate it. Okay, but it's sort of recognized as abnormal in a modern society. So that's why the application of the law of large numbers and long periods to politics or history signifies nothing less than the willful obliteration of their very subject matter. Okay, so it's a very poignant criticism. Because what she's arguing, because traditionally or classically, we need politics because we want to be human. We want to have deeds and events. But now the modern conceptualization of society sort of rule out this kind of deeds and events. Therefore, it's kind of obliteration of the very subject matter. It obliterates human being. It obliterates human plurality as such. And it is a hopeless enterprise to search for meanings in politics or significance in history, when everything that is not everyday behavior or automatic chance has been ruled out as immaterial, which I really like this argument because it sort of also explains why we tend to say that modern life is meaningless. Because meaning, as rare deeds and events, are ruled out as immaterial. But again, in order to show, sort of rediscover this kind of meaningfulness in everyday life, still like to show you a film clips, the very beginning of Chongqing Express. Okay, enjoy it.
每天你都有机会跟别人擦身而过，你也许对他一无所知，不过也许有一天他会变成你的朋友，或者是知己。我是一个警察，我的名字叫做何志，编号223。好了，保安。我们最接近的时候，我跟他的距离只有0.01公分。57个小时之后，我爱上了这个女人。
Okay, so this is what I mean by the rare deeds, so to rediscover in everyday life, because this is an absolutely everyday setting. So the kind of fruits there, the people just carry on their everyday activity, or they behave according to certain patterns. But what's the meaning of this activity? This kind of rare moments, this rare moments like falling to love with someone, this moment about suddenly build up a connection with other people. And it's this kind of rare deeds, according to Arendt, that give meaning to our everyday life. It's not everyday life as such, but everyday life, but the actual ordinarity in the everyday life. Okay, so with this, I sort of end the first part of the presentation. Let's say we have a 5 minutes breaks, and then we will continue to the latter half of it. Okay, so I type here in case people didn't find it. 5 minutes break. So we will be back at 50. Okay. Okay, hello. Please be back. Okay, so today I think I can end in another 40 minutes. Okay, so I just keep continue to do this. So and recap a bit. I think the key point, a key takeaway here is like deed and event constitute what Arendt called action. As action is always about extraordinary things. It's always about the unpredictable thing, which also gives the meaning to the repetitive and sort of momentous everyday life. And what Arendt lament and criticize this kind of exclusion of meaning of deeds and events in from our modern society, which also exclude meaning from the public realm for our life as well. So that's why he said like what we live in, which he called like a mass society, is also the rule of nobody. So this kind of the despotism of a person of a majority rule is what constitutes our modern condition. The unfortunate truth about behaviorism and the validity of its law is that the more people there are, the more likely they are to behave, and the less likely to tolerate non-behavior. So that's the condition of mass society. We always behave according to certain patterns. So everyone are the same. Everyone are equal. And now and this sort of kind of non-behavior, this sort of action or deeds or extraordinary action or speech are become non-behavior, which is intolerable. And everything comes up with this kind of idea about the rule of nobody because we are ruled by nobody. Either it's a communistic fiction or this kind of the invisible hand, according to the modern economist. It's the rule of nobody. Okay, and this is the point that Arendt is quite very very close to Heidegger because Heidegger has this notion about the self. Okay, in the modern society, we are not ourself but they self, and we are ruled by they, by this idea of nobody because we don't know who they are. We keep saying that okay, everybody does this. Okay, everybody does that. Everybody behave decently, but actually we don't know who that everybody is. And it's actually nobody. It's pure administration. It sort of reduces man as a whole in all his activities to the level of a conditioned and behaving animal. Okay, I really like Aaron's this kind of very sarcastic phrasing, a kind of human being reduced to a conditioned and behaving animal. And mass society where man as social animal rules supreme, and where apparently the survival of the species could be guaranteed on a worldwide scale, can at the same time threaten humanity with extinction. Okay, and this is also a very ferocious criticism, especially consider Arendt is also potentially criticizing totalitarianism. This idea, if we think that survival is all, we try to the society. Now it's become the society's job to do the housekeeping, to guarantee the survival of all the species. We think it's very good. Okay, everyone sort of survived, everyone are fair, but according to Arendt, this sort of potentially threaten humanity with extinction because we no longer sort of guarantee human being as such, human being as capable of action, of extraordinary thing, capable of meaning or constitute meaning in their life. Uh, instead, human beings are merely a conditioned and behaving animals. Okay, and like this picture, the classical criticism of the culture industry, also from Adorno, is that everyone just the same. Okay, no longer meaning, no longer deeds, no longer action. And therefore, he said we are a sort of a society is also laborers or job holders. Okay, so the new social realm transformed all modern communities into the societies of laborers and job holders. In other words, they became at once centered around one activity necessary to sustain life, which is radically different from the classical tradition, as we have said, because classically people think that necessary or the activity which sustain necessary to sustain life is labor, right? And labor is not deemed properly as a human activity. Only action is respected as a human activity. But now in our society, a society of laborers, so everyone concerned with the sustainment of life, and that's the point and problem. So society is the form in which the act of mutual dependence for the sake of life and nothing else assumes public significance. and where the activities connected with sheer survival are permitted to appear in the public, which is also very mind-blowing because we tend to think that it's normal and we tend to take it for granted. But as Arendt said, it is because the rise of society and that the concern with sheer survival are permitted to appear in the public realm. And I think this is very well illustrated by one of the most popular and also successful film in Chinese cinema, Dying to Survive. Right? So this is a very good example of this kind of sheer activity concern connected with sheer survival are permitted to appear in public. Okay, because this is a film about a group of a group of patients who try to survive, who try to maneuver inside this kind of medical and also especially the medical regime or the capitalist regime to get the purchasable medicine to cure their diseases. Okay, and it also after the release of the film, it actually caused some a factual social change in Chinese sort of medical system as well. It sounds very good by the modern standard, by the standard of society, because society considers only with the necessity of life or the survival. Right, sounds very good. But actually, I'm not sure about what's your reception of the film. But when I watch the film, I'm moved by it, but I do sense something very strange and something which I do not like, and that is this kind of concern for survival. Okay, I find it's very uncanny. It's like this kind of survival has become almost becomes the final or fundamental standard of society. And after reading Arendt's her description or her criticism, I start to understand why I feel very uncomfortable with this kind of ideology embedded in the film, because it represents this kind of sheer survival are permitted to appear in the public, which is absolutely excluded in the classical sense of the politics of the public realm. Okay, because they believe that this sort of a very idea about survival should be about private thing. Okay, it's not freedom; it's pre-political, and it's sort of it's also something we need to be free from in order to be free. And then Arendt argued this everything is an unnatural growth, so to speak, of the natural, of the biological process of our human being, of being natural, being determined by of our survivability and livability. Okay? And it's absolutely different from the classical concept of the excellence. So while dire necessity made labor indispensable to sustain life, excellence would have been the last thing to expect from it. And if you are not familiar with that, excellence is the supreme standard in a classical time, especially in a classical Greek. Excellence is a fundamental criteria to judge a person. Okay, a good person is also an excellent person. Which also means that you try to distinguish yourself from other people, which means that you are trying to distinguish yourself from the sheer laborer whose sole activity is about survival. And this kind of laborer in ancient time is slave. So excellence itself, in the Greeks, it's the word is like the Greek word. So arid as the Greeks, so virtuous as Romans would have called it, has always been assigned to the public realm where one could excel. Okay, one could distinguish oneself from all the other people, and this is the goal, and this is the function of. We should not use the word function, or this is the aim of the polis of the public realm. Okay, it's for excellence. And this neither education nor ingenuity nor talent can replace the constituent elements of the public realm, which can make it a proper place for human action, for human excellence. We say why? So we tend to think today. So excellence is a sort of ability, right? So it's sort of like cultivated by our education. Okay, it's sort of innate talent for ingenuity or sort of like talent or gift, this kind of thing. But for Arendt, she argued that what's the constituent elements for excellence is public realm. It's a public realm that sort of respect and encourage deeds and events. It's sort of the realm which excludes the sheer necessity and sheer use. It's only for free activity and free action, a characteristic of human being. And why? Because the public realm is also a common world. By common world, we mean, or Arendt mean, The reality of the public realm relies on the simultaneous presence of innumerable perspectives and aspects in which the common world presents itself, and for which no common measurement or denominator can ever be devised. Okay, so the common world means there's no common measurement, there's no common denominator or standard with which we can judge, with which we can measure the success of a person. That's why I think it's very well illustrated by this kind of classical idea about theater, about this kind of the kind of theater of the tragedy. That every people sit upon a different position, but they simultaneously are witness a single activity, a single end. And this is what Arendt called the plurality of human beings, about our distinction, about our differentiation from other potential human beings. And this constitutes the reality of the common world. So only where things can be seen by many in a variety of aspects without changing their identity, and that's the key point. I'm seen by everyone from different perspectives, but I'm still myself. So that those who are gathered around them know that they say sameness in utter diversity. Can worldly reality truly and reliably appear? And which is something just sounds very, very strange, right? Because this is not how we commonly think. Because we tend to think, okay, because in our modern world we tend to promote one standard, one denominator, which is statistics, unfortunately. Okay, and then we sort of think that sameness is the sameness of people from the same perspective, but for Arendt, it's not, or the classical world is not. It's from different perspectives. And this kind of simultaneity of human plurality, this kind of simultaneity of different that constitute reality, because reality is multifacet, but it's both multifacet and identical, and that's the reality. So a common world means difference of position and the resulting variety of perspective. So notwithstanding, everybody is always concerned with the same object. That's why she argued it's so important. For excellence to be, for excellence to exist, neither education nor ingenuity nor talent can sort of replace this condition of publicity, about this condition of common world, because we need other people. And we need other people not from a same perspective, but from different perspective to affirm our activity, to affirm our identity, our excellence as such, as my unique individuality. Okay? And this sort of also, when I read this, I also feel very touched. Because that's the reason I like to give this kind of presentation. I like to share this kind of idea and thoughts with other people from different perspectives, from different positions. Even though today there are only like 7 or 6 people come in, but that's okay. Those who come, absolutely, so you are my best friends. Like come to them, and I understand you not as a anonymous figure, but as absolute individual. I value you because you are a unique being. You are unique from your own perspective, but you simultaneously sort of affirm the identity of my person, the identity of myself, and it is this kind of thing that confirm the reality or reliability of my action as a human being. Okay, therefore, thank you every one of you to come in. Okay, happily thank you, because I exist truly and reliably. Okay, and which is different. Okay, you see the pattern of and a thought, which I also organized my presentation according to the thoughts she presents. So it's kind of comparison between the modern world and the classical world. So the classical world is a mass society. It's no longer a common world, or it's kind of, or what she called the mass hysteria. Okay, so where we see all people suddenly behave as though they were members of one family, so each multiplying and prolonging the perspective of his neighbor, like this one, which is different from this one. Okay, it's from innumerable different perspective, and it's all from the same perspective. Okay, so that's why it's the multiplying and prolonging the perspective of his neighbor. In both instances, men have become entirely private. Okay, sounds very strange. We tend to think this is a public realm, right? But actually become entirely private. That is, they have been deprived of seeing and hearing others as a unique human being, not as an identical or equalized mass, which is nothing but another of myself, a projection of my ego, of being seen and being heard by them. So they are all imprisoned in the subjectivity of their own singular existence, which I think is really very well illustrated by this picture. So like everyone, they are not seen or heard by others, and they cannot see and hear other as a unique human being. And that's why sort of imprisoned within themselves, within their own subjectivity, which does not cease to be singular if the same experience is multiplied innumerable times. The end of the common world has come when it is seen only under one aspect and is permitted to present itself in only one perspective. Okay, so that's why he said the common world has been lost. We become entirely private because there's only one perspective. And for a common world to exist, we need a multiple perspective. We need multiple unique individual to confirm the reality of our being. From a single perspective, life or the world is a sheer hallucination, a narcissistic hallucination of a single perspectivity. Okay? So that's why he also called it mass hysteria. And again, to think about this kind of privacy also as sort of privation. Okay, and you see, you can already sense like the etymological, I think that's the word, the root of the word. Up here, the privacy, there's something is privated, is deprived. So according to the classical idea, that to live an entirely private life means above all to be deprived of things essential to a truly human life. Which means that to be deprived of the reality that comes from being seen and heard by others. So again, the others is not the others in a Sartre's or in a Foucault sense of a panopticon. We're seen by the others who sort of normalize us, who sort of gaze us, sort of wish us to behave as everybody else. But it is the other from a different perspective, okay? From the other who are truly distinctive individuality. Okay, to be deprived of an objective relationship with them. So that comes from the being related to and separated from them through the intermediary of a common world of things. And also to be deprived of the possibility of achieving something more permanent than life itself. Okay, so it's about the reason that the classical world they have the kind of common world is because they believe that life should achieve something that is more fundamental, more permanent than just life, because life just come within a short span, right? And they want something more permanent or immortal. That's what they aspire to. That's why they have kind of epic like Achilles, like Odysseys, the kind of tragedy, because they want to be remembered by others from different perspective. Again, it's never from a single perspective. It's from diverse perspective, which is radically different from a modern conception, because we tend to think, especially in modern critical theory, we tend to think others as something, or the famous quote from Sartre, like others are hell, or others is hell. Because because others in the modern society sort of exercise this kind of normalizing regime, or this kind of Foucault's panopticon gaze. Everyone just sort of normalize you, sort of expect you to behave instead of act. By contrast, in the classical world of the common world, because the others are already occupying the different situation and different perspective, they embody individuality, and therefore, from their different perspective, they confirm the reality, the individuality of the person, and which also endows it with reality and permanency. It's sort of recognition of you as a human being, as a unique individual human being. So that's why the privation of the privacy lies in the absence of others, the others as a unique individual, and which also produce what Arendt called this kind of mass phenomenon of loneliness. We feel we are lonely because we are no longer within the presence of others, and which I think is very well illustrated by this kind of film, The Soul. You feel like, no, we are among others, right? There are other people all there, but it's sort of like you can sense that from the cinematography. You can sense that this is our everyday situation when we walk in the street. It's actually the absence of other, because it's the absence of others as unique individual. They are just a mass, okay, mass around, kind of spread out in the society. and everyone just heading for their own goals, as if everyone's all the same. And no one notices you, and no one confirms you. No one affirms your reality. And this is the mass phenomenon of loneliness, and also the kind of situation we are on a subway. Let's say I have this phenomenon, and I always want to take a photo when taking a subway. It's very strange. It's a very strange situation because you exist in a very close proximity to other people, right? Because in China especially, the subway is always crammed with people. So within such proximity, it also shows sort of alienation between people, this sort of distantiation between people. So many people. It's a very interesting picture because you see so many people are so close, while also so far away. And this kind of paradox underlies the kind of mass phenomenon of loneliness because the others are present. The others, as a unique human beings, are absent. And this is the absence. This is the privation. That's why Arendt argued like modern society is a household. It's a private realm in the sense of privation. It's the privation of others. It's the privation also of self, which produce this kind of mass phenomenon of loneliness. And then with this, we go on to this kind of idea about labor. Okay, because as Arendt argued, we are in a society of labor. We are a society of of job holders. And then he sort of pushed the argument as labor is actually, or it says classically conceptualized as enslavement. But in classical time, the contempt for laboring originally arising out of a passionate striving for freedom from necessity, because labor is about providing necessity for life, and a no less passionate impatience with every effort that left no trace. Okay, so there are twofold. So one, I want to be free from necessity. And second, I want to achieve something that is permanent, that is something that is lasting, that is memorable, okay, which constitute the meaning of my life, which to tell a story in a sense, but it left no trace there. So no monument, no great work worthy of remembrance, spread with the increasing demands for a polar side, because in the public life, I can distinguish myself, I can achieve excellence, and this excellence is recognized by others from a multitude of perspectives. So upon the same time, the citizen and its insistence on their abstention from all but political activities, right? Because in ancient Greek, it is deemed very unworthy of a citizen to labor, right? Only the free citizen, which means that you are not a laborer, can enter the public realm until it covered everything that demanded an effort. Okay, that's why you can see that you can sense that this is I take that this should be an illustration of like Sparta as like a labor holder, the kind of slaves. They're sort of enslaved to do the labor. That's why you have the classical contempt for laboring, and this kind of labor of our body, which is necessitated by its needs, is slavish. The labor meant to be enslaved by necessity, and this enslavement was inherent in the condition of human life. Okay, so because we have to provide our necessity, right? We have to live biologically, at least. So therefore, kind of slavishness or enslavement does constitute our humanity and our human life. And this is what the classical political thinker try to exclude from us. Thereby, they have the institution of slavery. And whether slavery is justifiable is another topic, which is neither addressed by Arendt nor should be addressed by me because it's absolutely different from topic and worth discussing as well. Okay, so instead of talking about the justification of slavery, we're thinking about slavery as a connotation of labor. So slavery also means a metamorphosis of man into something akin to a tame animal. So by laboring, by living only biologically, you are an animal. Okay, so that's why the classical idea contempt labor, which is absolutely different from our modern society, because our modern society, especially in our society, our principle based upon the glorification of labor. Okay, so this is our condition, and this means that the seemingly blasphemous notion of Marx that labor and not God created man, right? This is a traditional Marx idea, or that labor and not reason distinguished man from other animals, was only the most radical and consistent formulation of something upon which the whole modern age was agreed. So it's not just a Marxist country or socialist country, it's the rationale or raison d'etre of the whole modern society about the glorification of labor. And the labor, as a laborer, we are human. So you can see the difference between the classical idea and the modern idea, because the classical people say a laborer is an animal, or no more than an animal. But the modern idea say, as a laborer, you are a human being. So then you can see the difference and see why Arendt keep drawing this kind of comparison between the kind of classical conceptualization of human and modern conceptualization. And the reason why Marx and also the modern political thinker and economic thinker, they so much value labor is for its productivity. Okay, so the very reason for the elevation of labor in the modern age was its productivity, which means that this does not lie in any of the labor's products. So what we value is not the product, but it's the human power, whose strength is not exhausted when it has produced the means of its own subsistence and survival, but it's capable of producing a surplus. Okay, so it's a very classical Marxist notion about the surplus value, and that is more than is necessary for its own reproduction. Okay, so we value labor according to Arendt because the surplus value, because its productivity, because its ability of reproduction. But, so Arendt criticized, it never produced anything but life, right? Because it's labor, and labor is to provide the necessity of life. Therefore, notwithstanding your productivity, notwithstanding your ability of reproduction, what you produce is nothing more than life, and the life process of mankind as a species, not as a political being. To live and to labor for life will have become one and the same. Okay, so to live is to labor, and to labor for life is still it just live. To still, according to the classical notion, you're still living this kind of you're living biologically, or like an animal. Okay, so this is Arendt's criticism of the modern glorification of labor. And also, we still have more things to do. We have the division of labor, right? So the division of labor is based on the fact that two men can put their labor power together and behave toward each other as though they were one, which that's why it's absolutely different from ancient idea of a human being as a unique individual, as individuality. So everyone on the kind of production line, you are just interchangeable with other. And this is the division of labor. It does not confirm the individuality. Instead, it keeps blurring this kind of boundary between one individual with another. So this oneness is the exact opposite of cooperation. So it indicates the unity of the species with regard to which every single member is the same and exchangeable. That's why Arendt said this kind of labor society also threaten the existence of humanity, because humanity means plurality, means individuality, and now human beings become basically exchangeable, and which also exclude meaning, the meaning of being from the modern society. And also this idea from work to labor. Remember, like we will talk about work later, probably in the next presentation. But here we have this kind of transformation from work and labor. So the things of the modern world have become labor products whose natural fate is to be consumed, instead of work products which are to be used. So remember, so work refers to the production of useful objects, or like the clothing. It's for use. It's not for. It's not to sustain my life, my biological process, but it's for being used. But in a labor society or in a modern society, so everything has become a labor product, which is to be consumed. Okay, and I illustrate with this kind of a picture. I know it's very gender stereotypical, which should be worn. It doesn't mean that only women consume. Men does shop as well. But it does illustrate the point about the consumption, about the consumerism of a modern society. So she argued that the endlessness of the laboring process is guaranteed by ever-recurring trends of consumption. So the endlessness of production can be assured only if its products lose their use character and become more and more objects of consumption, and are absolutely different. For being a use object, it means permanent. like a cloth. It's for wearing. Okay, it's meant to be permanent. It's meant to be long lasting. But this is different from the logic of consumption. For consumption, it's almost like eating. It's like you consume this one and soon you will need the other. And this is also the logic of consumer in society, because you need this kind of ever recurring needs of consumption in order to sustain laboring process. Because in modern society, labor is also endless, which should be backed up by a continuous consumption. And therefore, you see that consumption and labor are the same, actually, in modern society. So we have changed work into laboring. Okay, we labor in order to consume, and consume in order to support continuous laboring. Okay? And that's why we transform to what she called a consumerist society. Okay, so a consumerist society is also, which basically means the society of laborers, because labor and consumption are about two stages of one process imposed upon man by the necessity of life. So just for necessity of life and nothing more than life. Okay, so it's just about this kind of biological life, about sustaining myself. It's nothing about permanent. It's nothing about excellent. It's nothing about freedom. It's just about life in basic animalistic or biological sense. Okay, so we have almost achieved in leveling all human activities to the common denominator of securing the necessity of life and providing for their abundance. Okay, so again, compared with ancient times, according to Arendt, we need to have we can't have a common denominator, because we need a multiple perspective to confirm a reality. But now we sort of change or leveling down or reducing all human activity to consumption and to kind of securing the necessity of life and to provide abundance. Therefore, I think this picture, I just type like consumer society and I get this picture, which I think is very illustrative. So it's like this kind of development of human being from monkey or chimpanzee, gradually Homo faber and Homo sapien, and then into a human being, and then into the kind of barcode. Okay, so it's kind of, you are part of the you labor in order to consume and consume in order to be consumed. Okay, and this is the you consume your life and life about consumption. So whatever we do, we are supposed to do for the sake of making a living, and that's really to the point. Because also share with you one of the anecdote. It's like so like the 2 weeks ago have a party. It's like a family parties with some of the friends of my mother. So one of the lady, when she was asked what her husband is doing, we know that her husband is running a business, and she is probably the most wealthy, the most wealthy family in that party, and she's very well educated. So she used to be a college teacher, and they provide the international education for their daughter. So therefore, they're absolutely this kind of upper middle class family. And then, so her husband is also running a business. And when she was asked what her husband is doing, and she literally answering this way, making a living. Oh no, he's just making a living, and then everyone answer, and we are making a living, and everyone are making a living. So I was shocked. It's a very interesting way, but it has something to do with Chinese culture as well, because China, we value 和光同尘. We value this kind of humbleness and humility, this kind of anonymity, but that's a different story. That's a very illustrative point. It's just like when I read this in Hannah Arendt, I just think about that party several weeks ago. Yeah, so whatever we do, we're supposed to do for the sake of making a living. And any other human activities are deemed as abnormal. Like what I'm doing now is absolutely abnormal because it does not make a living. It does not earn any money from it, and you do not earn any money from attending this presentation. So what we are doing, according to the kind of modern statistic or economic view, is absolutely normal and on the brinkmanship of madness. Okay, so I'm sorry for that. But this is this kind of modern logic of consumer society. And then life becomes consumption. So when all human productivity would be sucked into the kind of enormous intensified life process and would follow automatically without pain or effort is an ever recurrent natural cycle. That's what we say. It's like basically it's about life. It's about bare life. Life as a biological process get intensified. This kind of ever recurrent natural cycle and nothing more. Nothing less and nothing more. Including our spare time. So the spare time that animal laborans, this is a Latin word as well, basically means animal laborer. You can already guess from the form of the word. So it's never spent in anything but consumption. And the more time left to him, the greedier and more craving his appetite, and which is very well illustrated by this kind of TikTok consumption, cyber consumption that basically occupy most of people's spare time. So right, so after the work, after the labor, they go back to home and just start with TikTok and whatever, like a short video, this kind of online consumption. Yeah, and that's it because we labor in order to consume and consume in order to labor more. And this is the intensified life process, recurring natural cycle that sort of caught us, a modern human being, into our living. So no object of the world will be saved from consumption and annihilation through consumption. And that's why it's also a waste economy. We do waste too many things because we need to consume. We do not use things. We do not wear clothes. We consume them. Okay? And then it's also a mass culture as what Arendt called universal unhappiness. Because what is mass culture according to Arendt? So mass culture is private activity displayed in the open, which according to her is a radical change because as you see that as we have discussed, public ground and private ground in ancient time are absolutely demarcated for a reason because necessities and what is deemed unhuman should be confined in the private realm, and public realm should be reserved for political activity, to be free, to be excellent, to be recognized by your peers from different perspective. But now the kind of mass culture is like a privacy invaded into the open, which deprive the freedom, the freedom and excellence of the public realm. So it's kind of a deep-rooted trouble in kind of universal unhappiness, also the kind of mass phenomena of loneliness, due on one side to the troubled balance between laboring and consumption. This kind of almost tiring process of we labor in order to consume, consume in order to feed into our labor, and on the other, the persistent demands of the animal laborants to obtain happiness. And also, she argued that this kind of totalitarianism ethics about the maximum happiness in the world is also very characteristic of modern society, and which is only imaginable on the condition of animal laborance, of value labor, of the glorification of labor, because the life process of it. Because what is happiness? It's the life process of exhaustion and regeneration, of gain and release from pain, strike a perfect balance. Okay, so happiness is nothing more than this balance. It's about I can earn my living, literally. So I can earn what I need to consume, and this is a balance. Achieving this balance means happiness and nothing more. Okay, that's why it becomes the kind of utilitarianism value becomes promoted together with labor as a sort of universal standard for the modern government and society, and that's the problem because it's actually the symptom is kind of actually the universal unhappiness. This kind of universal demand for happiness and the widespread unhappiness in our society, and these are two sides of the same coin, are among the most persuasive signs that we have begun live in a labor society. In a labor society, when higher, as we have said at the very beginning of the presentation, the higher and more meaningful activities are excluded, are not recognized, are deemed as abnormal, as unnatural, as whatever you like to say, the kind of mad. And because we are, as human beings, we are fundamentally unsatisfied, but we are still pursuing happiness. And happiness, this kind of balance between labor and consumption, which sometimes can be kept, mostly not. And then anyway, we're still deprived of meaning of being free, the meaning of being an individual, being recognized by my peers. This is the cause of the kind of widespread unhappiness. Okay, and that's why in order to be happy in a higher and more meaningful sense, I need to give this kind of presentation I need to be recognized by all of you who, from different perspectives, attend this kind of presentation, who confirm to me the kind of individuality that I have enjoyed. So therefore, absolutely thank you for that again. So with this, we're kind of end with the kind of coda for this kind of presentation. It's kind of modern homelessness. Okay, so Arendt argues about without being at home in the midst of things whose durabilities makes them fit for use, and for erecting a world whose very permanence stands in direct contrast to life, the life would never be human. Remember that we have changed from the kind of use value, the durability of things, to consumability, the ability to be consumed, which also add into the made the modern world absolutely uncertain or impermanent. Okay, you have to keep updating your wardrobe. You need to keep updating your iPhone, or several years ago it will be malfunctional. You just need to keep being consumed. Therefore, it deprives you even of your home, because being at home means the kind of durability, means permanence, without which life would not be human. Okay, and the danger is that such a society, a society of labor or job holder, dazzled by the abundance of its growing fertility and caught in the smooth functioning of a never-ending process, will no longer be able to recognize its own futility, and that's the key point. So we are dazzled in this day. We have loads of things to consume. You opened up your phone or your WeChat, have loads of information to get, loads of video to watch. You opened up TikTok, loads of short videos. You opened up iQIYI or whatever, you loads of films to watch. We are dazzled by this abundancy. We think this is the value, this is the richness of our modern life. But Arendt argues that it no longer recognize its own futility, and the futility of a life which does not fix or realize itself in any permanent subject which endures after its labor is past. Okay, we no longer have a life that is permanent, that is valuable in a sense of absolute value. We no longer have ourselves as a unique, as a real individual human being. And that characterizes this kind of modern homelessness. About we do not have a home indeed. We think even our family. I think home. If you do analysis about modern, the house market is something. It's a very different. It's a very different, interesting story. But it's about general idea about homelessness. About we are no longer permanent. We are no longer recognized by our peers from multiple perspectives. We're only recognized as a standardized product, a labor product who produce labors, a labor product who produce labor. I'm sorry, how to phrase it? Okay, we are no more than labor product who produce labor products. Okay, and then life does not have any meaning. It's mere futility. Okay, or to quote Ecclesiastic or Bible, it's like vanity, vanity, always vanity. Under the sun, everything is the same. It's to keep this kind of cyclical consumption, laboring for consumption, and consuming my own labor. There's no more excellency, no more individuality. And how to achieve them, and how to kind of regain. So what is action, and what is to be human, and what is to be unique human being? Please wait for the next part of Arendt's The Human Condition. Hopefully you'll still be present to stay with me, because this is I try to do everything in this kind of single presentation, but there are loads of things to share with you for now. And then if you are still willing to keep the discussion, absolutely welcome to share thoughts with me or other people via the WeChat group, and absolutely welcome as well to expect and attend the next presentation. Okay, thank you so much for coming here. Thank you.